From janitor's son to ring legend, the shocking truth behind his knockout. In the heart of Chicago's South Side, the South Side Fight Club pulses with the raw energy of a city that never backs down. On a sweltering July night in 2025, the gym's packed crowd expects a spectacle when Coach Randy Thompson calls up Ethan Carter, the quiet son of the janitor, Clara, for a quick exhibition match. They laugh, ready for a joke, until Ethan steps into the ring. In under a minute, he dismantles the gym's star fighter, Marcus the Hammer Jones, silencing the room and shattering expectations. But Ethan's skill hides a secret. His mother, Clara, isn't just a janitor. Once a legendary military boxer, she's trained her son in the shadows, passing down a legacy forged in battles the world never saw. As Ethan rises from obscurity to claim his place in the gym, questions linger. Can he redefine a place built on bravado? Will Clara's hidden past come to light? And what happens when a boy trained to survive decides to fight for something more? The underdog's moment. In the heart of Chicago's gritty South Side, the old Lincoln High School gymnasium buzzed with anticipation. The air was thick with the scent of sweat, rubber mats, and stale popcorn from the concession stand. It was a Friday evening in late July 2025, and the bleachers were packed to the brim with students, parents, and locals, all crammed together for the annual amateur boxing tournament. The crowd's energy crackled, kids laughed, phones glowed as they recorded, and the chatter was a constant hum, punctuated by cheers as the semi-finals wrapped up. The judges had stepped away to deliberate, leaving a restless pause in the action. That's when Coach Randy Thompson, a bear of a man with a voice that could shake the rafters, saw his chance to keep the crowd entertained. Randy was a legend in these parts, not just at Lincoln High, but across the city's boxing scene. His loud personality matched his reputation for turning scrappy kids into champions. He thrived on spectacle, loved the roar of the crowd, and wasn't above a little showmanship to keep them hooked. Stepping into the center of the ring, he grabbed the microphone, his gravelly voice cutting through the gym's din like a knife. "All right, folks," he bellowed, scanning the bleachers with a sly grin. "While the judges figure out who's heading to the finals, let's not just sit here twiddling our thumbs. Who's up for a little exhibition match to keep things hot?" The crowd erupted. Some shouted for more fights, others whistled, and a few kids in the back started chanting, "Bring it on!" Randy's eyes gleamed. He loved moments like this, where he could stir the pot and give the people what they wanted. Drama, maybe even a bit of humiliation. His gaze swept the gym, landing on a lanky kid leaning against the wall near the exit. The boy wore a faded grey hoodie, his hands stuffed in his pockets, his face calm and unreadable. He wasn't part of the usual crowd, didn't join in the laughter or the banter. To Randy, he was perfect, a nobody, an easy target for a quick laugh. "Hey, you!" Randy called, pointing. "Yeah, you kid. Ethan, right? Ethan Carter, son of our janitor, Miss Clara. Come on up here. Let's see what you got in that ring." The gym exploded with laughter. A few kids near Ethan nudged him, grinning. "Go on, man, it'll be fun," they teased. Ethan didn't flinch. His dark eyes flicked to Randy, then to the ring, steady and unflinching. The crowd's mockery washed over him, but he moved forward, slow and deliberate, as if the noise didn't exist. He passed his mother, Clara Carter, who sat quietly on a bench near the wall, her cleaning cart parked beside her. Clara's face tightened, her knuckles whitening around the handle of a mop. "Ethan, don't," she whispered, her voice low but firm. But Ethan only gave her a slight nod, his expression unreadable, and kept walking. By the time he climbed into the ring, the laughter had grown louder, sharper. Clara Carter wasn't just any janitor. Unknown to the crowd, the school, or even Coach Randy, she carried a secret that could have turned the gym upside down. 2 decades ago, Clara had been Sergeant Clara Hayes, a decorated military boxer, one of the best hand-to-hand combatants in her unit. She'd fought in underground rings during her service, earning scars and respect in equal measure. But the military wasn't kind to women like her, too skilled, too independent. Political purges and backstabbing among the brass had forced her out, her record buried, her name erased from the ranks. Disillusioned, she'd chosen a quiet life, retreating to the shadows of Chicago's South Side. Now she swept floors and scrubbed lockers at Lincoln High, invisible to the world. But every night, in the dim basement of their small apartment, Clara trained her son, Ethan. From the time he could walk, she'd taught him the art of the fight, footwork, precision, discipline, not for glory, but for survival. She'd drilled into him the importance of staying low, staying hidden until the world forced his hand. Tonight it had. Randy, oblivious to the storm he was about to unleash, turned to his team and beckoned one of his star fighters, a broad-shouldered senior named Marcus the Hammer Jones. Marcus swaggered out of the locker room, gloves slung over his shoulder, a cocky grin plastered on his face. At 18, he was the gym's golden boy, undefeated in the local circuit and Randy's pride and joy. "Marcus, my man," Randy said, clapping him on the back. "Give our guest here a little taste of what we do. Keep it light, just a show for the folks." Marcus nodded, climbing into the ring with the ease of someone who knew he was untouchable. He didn't even bother warming up, tossing a mock yawn to the crowd, who ate it up with cheers and laughter. The referee, a wiry old man named Joe, checked their gloves with a skeptical frown. He glanced at Randy, who waved him off impatiently. "1 minute, clean round, no funny business," Joe muttered, stepping back. Ethan stood in his corner, silent, his eyes locked on Marcus. His hands were already in position, his stance low and steady, like a coiled spring. Marcus, still grinning, bounced on his toes, throwing a few lazy jabs into the air to warm up the crowd. The gong rang, and the gym leaned forward, phones raised, ready for what they thought would be a quick, humiliating takedown. Marcus moved first, striding toward Ethan with a casual jab, barely putting weight behind it. He expected Ethan to flinch, to stumble, maybe even to back away, but Ethan didn't. He slipped to the side, smooth as water, his movement so subtle it was almost invisible. In a flash, his counterpunch landed, a sharp, precise hook to Marcus's ribs. The crowd's laughter faltered. Marcus blinked, startled, and threw a harder punch, this one with real intent. Ethan ducked, shifted left, and snapped a jab to Marcus's chin. The gym went quiet, the air shifting. Marcus, now visibly annoyed, lunged forward with a flurry of blows, each one heavy and aggressive. Ethan danced around them, his footwork flawless, his counters relentless. Another to the stomach, then a swift uppercut. Marcus staggered, his knees buckling. The crowd was silent now, phones lowering, eyes wide. Randy's grin vanished. He leaned forward, hands gripping the ropes, his face a mask of disbelief. In the bleachers, Clara watched, her heart pounding. She'd trained Ethan for moments like this, but she'd never wanted him to face them. Not yet. Not like this. Ethan didn't gloat. He didn't even look at the crowd. As Marcus dropped to one knee, gasping, Ethan lowered his gloves and stepped to the edge of the ring. The gong hadn't even rung again. The fight was over in less than a minute. The silence in the Southside Fight Club's gym was deafening. The old warehouse-turned-dojo, with its cracked concrete floors and flickering fluorescent lights, had never felt so still. Just moments ago, the crowd had been rowdy, buzzing with the kind of energy only a Chicago summer night could ignite. Now every eye was fixed on the ring where Ethan Carter stood, his gloves lowered, his breathing steady, as Marcus Jones knelt on the mat, clutching his jaw. The referee, Joe, hesitated, his hand half raised, unsure whether to call the round or let the moment linger. Coach Randy Thompson stood frozen at ringside, his usual bravado replaced by a pale, stunned expression. He'd orchestrated this exhibition to amuse the crowd, to make Ethan, a janitor's kid, a punchline. Instead, Ethan had dismantled his star fighter in under a minute, exposing cracks in Randy's carefully built world. Clara Carter sat in the shadows near the gym's back wall, her cleaning cart a silent witness to the scene. Her heart thumped against her ribs, a mix of pride and dread. She'd spent years teaching Ethan to hide his skill, to blend into the background, just as she had after the military betrayed her. As Sergeant Clara Hayes, she'd been a force in the Army's underground fight clubs, her fists earning her a reputation that rattled her superiors. But jealousy and politics had ended her career, forcing her into obscurity. She'd taken the janitor job at Southside Fight Club to stay close to the world she loved, even if it meant mopping floors instead of throwing punches. Every night, in their cramped apartment basement, she'd trained Ethan, not for fame, but to carry the strength she'd been denied. Now, watching him in the ring, she knew the secret she'd guarded was out. Ethan stepped out of the ring, ignoring the stunned crowd. He didn't look at Marcus, still catching his breath on the mat, or at Randy, whose hands gripped the ropes like a lifeline. He moved with the same quiet purpose he'd shown entering the ring, his grey hoodie slightly damp with sweat. The crowd parted as he walked toward the locker room, their whispers trailing him like echoes. A few kids lowered their phones, no longer filming, as if ashamed of their earlier laughter. Near the exit, an old security guard named Frank, a grizzled ex-cop who'd seen every kind of fight in this gym, gave Ethan a nod, not the patronizing kind he'd given kids before, but one of respect, man to man. Ethan returned it and slipped through the door. In the locker room, Ethan sat on a worn bench, peeling off his gloves. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a heavy calm in its place. He hadn't wanted this fight, hadn't asked for the spotlight. But when Randy called him out, something in him snapped. Not anger, but a refusal to be a joke. Clara had taught him that every punch was a statement, every dodge a strategy. He'd used her lessons not to win, but to prove he wasn't invisible. Now, sitting alone, he felt no triumph, only the weight of what came next. The world had seen him, and there was no going back. Clara entered quietly, her work boots soft against the concrete. She sat beside him, her hands clasped, still calloused from years of fighting. For a long moment, they said nothing. The silence between them was warm, full of unspoken understanding. Finally, Clara spoke, her voice low. "I told you to stay out of it, Ethan. I didn't want this for you. Not yet." Ethan glanced at her, his dark eyes steady. "They didn't give me a choice, Mom. You taught me not to back down." Clara's lips twitched, a flicker of a smile. She'd raised him to be strong, but seeing him in the ring had stirred memories of her own battles, ones she'd fought and lost not in the ring, but in the corridors of power. "I'm sorry I didn't stop it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I should have known Randy would pull something like this." Ethan shook his head. "He thought it'd be a show. So did they. Let them think what they want. Doesn't change what I did." Clara looked at him, pride swelling despite the ache in her chest. She'd trained him to survive, but he'd done more. He'd commanded respect in a place built to mock him. The door creaked open, and Marcus stepped in, his sports jacket slung over one shoulder. His face was flushed, his jaw still tender, but his eyes weren't angry. He stopped a few feet away, shifting his weight. "Hey, Ethan," he said, his voice rough. I just wanted to say thanks. Not for the fight, but for showing me something real." He met Ethan's gaze, holding it for a moment. "You're the real deal, man." Ethan studied him, then gave a slight nod. Marcus nodded back and left, the door swinging shut behind him. Outside, the gym was stirring again, voices rising as the shock wore off. Randy stood by the ring, surrounded by his fighters and a few lingering spectators, but his mind was elsewhere. He'd built his reputation on spotting talent, on knowing who belonged in the ring. Yet he'd missed Ethan completely, written him off as the janitor's kid. Now his own methods, his reliance on flash and intimidation, felt hollow. He glanced toward the locker room, wondering who Ethan really was. Clara stood, brushing her hands on her work pants. "You've got a choice now, Ethan," she said. "You can walk away, keep to the shadows like I did, or you can step up, show them what you're made of." Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. "What'd you do if you had the chance again?" he asked. Clara's eyes softened, a rare vulnerability showing. "I'd fight," she said. "Not for them, but for me." Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. He'd spent years training in secret, carrying his mother's lessons like a hidden weapon. Tonight, he'd used them, and the world had noticed. The idea of joining the gym, of stepping out of the shadows, felt daunting but right. "I'm not hiding anymore," he said quietly. Clara smiled, a real one this time, and squeezed his shoulder. "Then let's show 'em what we've got." The Southside Fight Club gym was no longer the same. The air, once thick with the casual bravado of Chicago's amateur boxing scene, now carried a weight of unspoken respect. The cracked concrete floors and faded fight posters on the walls seemed to hold their breath, as if the old warehouse-turned-dojo knew it had witnessed something extraordinary. Ethan Carter's one-minute demolition of Marcus the Hammer Jones had shifted the gym's axis, and the ripples were still spreading. The crowd had dispersed that July evening in 2025, but the story of the janitor's kid who'd silenced the room was already spreading through the South Side like wildfire. Whispers followed Ethan as he walked the neighborhood streets, and eyes lingered on Clara Carter, who pushed her cleaning cart with the same quiet dignity she always had. In the days that followed, Ethan returned to the gym. Not as a spectator, but as a fighter. His mother's words had lit a fire in him. Clara's past as Sergeant Clara Hayes, a military boxer forced into obscurity by betrayal, had shaped her son's resolve. She'd trained him in secret, her lessons forged in the underground rings of her army days, where she'd fought to prove herself in a world that tried to erase her. Now, Ethan carried that legacy, not as a burden but as a weapon. He didn't crave the spotlight, but he was done hiding. With Clara's encouragement, he approached Coach Randy Thompson, who was still reeling from the upset. Randy, his ego bruised but his curiosity piqued, saw something in Ethan he couldn't ignore, a raw, disciplined talent that outshone his own methods. "All right, kid," Randy said, his voice gruff but tinged with respect. "You're in. Let's see what you can do." Ethan's integration into the gym wasn't seamless. Some fighters, loyal to Marcus and wary of the newcomer, kept their distance. Others, intrigued by his skill, watched him closely during sparring sessions. Ethan didn't talk much, but his fists spoke volumes. His footwork was precise, his punches sharp, each move a testament to Clara's rigorous training. Marcus, to his credit, didn't hold a grudge. After their locker room exchange, he became one of Ethan's first allies, often pairing up with him to drill combinations. "You got something special, man," Marcus said one day, wiping sweat from his brow. "I ain't mad. You showed me I got work to do." Ethan nodded, a rare half-smile breaking through his stoic demeanor. Clara watched from the sidelines, her mop and bucket ever present. The gym's regulars still saw her as the janitor, oblivious to the truth of her past. But a few began to notice the way Ethan's movements mirrored techniques not taught in Randy's classes. Military-style precision, economy of motion, strikes that hit like targeted missiles. Whispers grew. Where had this kid learned to fight like that? Clara kept her silence, her eyes sharp as she cleaned, her pride hidden behind a neutral expression. She'd chosen this life to protect Ethan, to shield him from the politics and betrayals that had crushed her career. But now, as he stepped into the ring day after day, she felt a spark of hope. Maybe he could reclaim what she'd lost, not for glory, but for truth. Months passed, and Ethan's presence transformed the gym. His quiet determination inspired younger fighters who began mimicking his disciplined approach. Randy, initially hesitant, started incorporating Ethan's techniques into his coaching, blending them with his own flair. The gym's culture shifted, less showboating, more focus. One evening, after a particularly grueling session, Randy pulled Ethan aside. "Kid, you're not just a fighter, you've got a teacher's instinct. Ever thought about leading a class?" Ethan blinked, caught off guard. He glanced at Clara, who was sweeping nearby, her eyes meeting his with a knowing look. She'd taught him everything. Now it was his turn to pass it on. Ethan took the offer. By early 2026, he was standing at the front of the gym, leading drills for a group of wide-eyed kids. His voice was calm but firm, his instructions clear, echoing the lessons Clara had drilled into him. "It's not about the punch," he'd say, demonstrating a quick jab. "It's about the why behind it." The kids listened, hanging on his every word. Randy watched from the back, arms crossed, a mix of pride and humility in his eyes. He'd built this gym on spectacle, but Ethan, and unknowingly Clara, had shown him there was more to fighting than flash. One night, after the gym emptied, Clara and Ethan stayed late. She sat on a bench, watching him shadowbox in the ring, her heart full. "I never wanted you to fight my battles," she said softly. Ethan stopped, turning to her. "I'm not," he replied. "I'm fighting mine, but you showed me how." Clara smiled, her eyes glistening. For the first time in years she felt seen, not as a janitor, but as the warrior she'd always been. Ethan climbed out of the ring and sat beside her, the silence between them as full as it had been that night after his first fight. Together, they'd turned the shadows into a stage, proving that strength wasn't about who shouted loudest, but who fought smartest.